Hey everybody, it's Sean and Trey with Reactions to the Classics. Before we get started today, we just wanted to invite you to take a look at our Patreon page where we have all kinds of reward tiers, anywhere from reacting to an entire album to songs, and to support us for as little as $1 a month. It really helps us out.
And you can also check out our Facebook and Discord groups down below. Got a great community of people who love music. And all that to say, y'all, let's get to today's video.
What's going on, everybody? It's Sean, joined again by my beautiful bride, Gina. And today on Reactions to the Classic, we have Lewis Capaldi's debut album,
Divinely Uninspired to a Hellish Extent, the extended version.
That is correct. That weird title actually comes from a song that didn't even make it on the album called Figure It Out. They ran out of time, didn't have time to mix it, but that's where that weird title comes from. It's Lewis's debut album, came out in May of 2019. Went to #1 instantly in the UK and Ireland. It also is the best-selling album in the UK of the last 5 years. We actually came across Lewis by our daughter wanting us to do a song reaction for Lewis's song, Someone You Love. And we both
loved it.
Exactly, no pun intended. I think it might have been you that then dove into the album and said this thing's fantastic. And so here we are. So I did a little studying on Lewis. He's only 23 years old. I was shocked when I saw him and just the songwriting and the voice would seem to come from someone much older.
And actually, he did not enjoy recording this album. He talked about so many people enjoy the process of recording their first album, but he actually found it very stressful and boring, was his words. So I just found that to be a little bit interesting that this was something so huge for him and he didn't even really like the process. Almost all of the songs on this album deal with breakup and heartbreak, heartache, which is interesting because Lewis is actually a very funny guy.
Yeah, he is.
And some of the interviews that I looked at during the research, you could just tell like he's pretty hilarious. And so having so many songs with all of these heartache lyrics just doesn't really kind of fit with his personality.
Yeah, you wouldn't expect it. But we're going to go to a song that actually isn't so down.
It's one of the most upbeat songs on the album. I feel like it started with this upbeat song and it ended with an upbeat song.
Yeah,
everything in the middle was just
pretty
a downer.
Yeah, it was. Downer in a good way, though. They're fantastic tunes. The first song is Grace. It peaked at #9 in the UK. It appears to be about him trying to get over a relationship where in that relationship, he found peace. That's where the grace is at. Like she brought him the peace from everything else going on in the world. I thought this song was a wonderful way to start. It's got a lot going on instrumentally. It's very diverse. A lot of these songs are not, but this is very diverse instrumentally. Even some nice touches where the backing vocals are actually mixed where it's Lewis backing himself up. So this is one of my favorite songs on the album. What'd you think of it?
No, I loved it. I loved all the songs on the entire album.
Well, you can't give it away, Gina.
I know.
You gotta be a teaser alert.
So I did enjoy this one as well. And she was his salvation.
Yes.
And that was one of the lyrics that was in there. Next up is Bruises, and he actually wrote this on his 20th birthday, and it only took about 4 hours from beginning to end.
Yeah, and that's why it's instrumentally really sparse on this. They were going to go back later and add more production and more instruments, and then they just decided to leave it as it is. He actually released this on his own in 2017, and then when Virgin Records signed him, they re-released it, and it became his first single off his EP, Bloom. For me, this song is good, but it was like one of the lower songs on the album for me. What did you think of it?
Well, I actually really liked it
Well, you might really like all of it. Something's got to be lower on
there's a couple of things lower, but this was not one of them,
Okay,
actually.
awesome.
My biggest takeaway here was just the romanticizing of this bad relationship. There's a reason he broke up with her, and he's only thinking about all of the positives and the good things, which we tend to do as human beings. One of the lyrics that really stood out to me was, I've been told to get you off my mind, but I hope I never lose the bruises that you left behind. So the pain that the relationship caused him, he doesn't want to forget those.
Yeah, and I think that was a very good songwriting tactic. And he wrote all of these songs. There are several people that helped him on all of them. A lot of the songs have 5 songwriting credits, including him. So I thought that was interesting. You don't usually see that on songs, that many people contribute to it. One of the interesting things, especially in that first verse, you could really hear his Scottish accent, which I thought was pretty cool. And now we're up to Hold Me While You Wait.
This was definitely one of my favorites.
This was released as a single, debuted at #1 in Ireland and Scotland and 4 in the UK. In the UK, became the first artist since Ed Sheeran to have 2 songs in the top 5 of the singles chart, as Someone You Love was still #1. He wrote it about the uncertainty of being in a relationship when you know what you want, but your partner, I mean, I don't mean her, but you know, your partner isn't sure what they want, and kind of the hopelessness or desperateness of that. And I think most of us have been there. Hopefully we're not there right now.
And you could really feel that desperation, I feel like, in his vocals throughout the entire song. I feel like his voice was the main part of this song. It wasn't like there was a lot of instrumentation in the background. It's just the piano and his voice.
And he pulls that off on several of these. That was actually one of my notes on here, power of his voice. I listen to a ton of music. He has one of the most powerful voices I have ever heard, and great insight that you had in that the power of his voice can carry this song. It carries several others. Actually, the next one we are going to get to. Next up, Someone You Loved. It was #1 in the UK for 7 weeks. It took 24 weeks to climb to #1 in the US, one of the longest chart climbs in US history. Lewis talked about this song and said, you know, people say the best songs just fall in your lap and you sit down and write them, but he goes, that's never my experience. It took him 6 months to write this song.
And it was actually about just a previous partner of his that he's still pining away for. Essentially, I guess life is easier when you have a partner that you can rely on. A couple of the lyrics I feel like that really stood out to me was, I guess I kind of like the way you numbed all the pain. I guess I kind of like the way you helped me escape. So he looked at her as someone who helped him get through life. Even with all the sucky things that he experiences day to day, she was there to help him numb that pain, anything that was hard for him. And so now that she's gone, life is a little bit more difficult.
And there were parts of this song in the lyrics I highly identify with. The first part you read there, having someone who gets you through the day, who numbs all the pain. I suffer with a chronic illness. A lot of times the days are tough, but that's literally how I look at you. So I identified with that part. Hopefully not the part that, you know, you step out the door, but one of the things on this song is it's perfectly arranged and it's only the piano and his voice.
Yes.
There is nothing else and you need nothing else, and you've got to be an outstanding vocalist to carry that off. This is nearly the perfect song in my opinion. What did you think?
No, I loved it. I loved everything about it. The power of his voice just comes through. And that was the first thing I noticed when we listened to this, when Mackenzie told us to listen to this. And so many of the songs on this album are just him, his voice, and the piano, and that raw emotion that's just coming out of him. I don't know. I just love everything about him.
I know you do.
All right, next up we have Maybe, and this one was another one that I enjoyed a lot. This one talks about how he really second guesses so much of the decisions that he makes, and he's really his own worst critic, I think, just in life in general.
And I think a lot of us are that way, whether we admit it openly or not. One of the lines I really like in this is, and I ain't trying to be lonely solely, but everything I touch turns to stone. Maybe I'm better off on my own. So that just plays into what you were talking about. He's just reflecting on things. I mess this up, which normally we're not solely to blame, but oftentimes we do self-convict. I thought this song was the best produced, had the most going on instrumentally. It starts out with just the acoustic and Lewis, then it builds, it has shifting tempos, nice backing vocals. So as a song itself, this one is the most complete. Next up is Forever, mainly piano and a little bit of mellow bass on this one. What's it about?
He basically never promised her forever, even though I guess they intended to be together for a long time. It wasn't necessarily going to be forever. You could really hear that melancholy rawness, that emotion throughout the entire song. Yeah,
I thought this was a good one. I thought they varied up the production a little bit, had a little more instrumentation than some of these others that we're about to get to. For me, it was a little better than middle of the road on this album.
I really enjoyed it.
It doesn't mean I didn't enjoy it. I'm just trying. There's 15 songs.
It ranked pretty high up there.
Some's got to be upper tier, mid tier, lower tier, still really good.
Next up, we have One. It explores the difficulties of a relationship and the idea that you can give your all but receive nothing in return. However, it is also emphasized within this song that the heartbreak that is experienced as a result of unconditional love can also be mended by another who has experienced the same.
Lewis actually said the inspiration to this was one of his his friends showed him a poem that a guy had written to his girlfriend's ex that said, basically, thank you for effing everything up, because if you wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't have stepped in right here, which plays into some of the lyrics. In the chorus, I wish I could say thank you for all the mistakes, thank you for all the pain. I guess somebody else's loss is another's gain. I'm saying thank you to the one who let her get away. So I thought that was tremendous. That is a real shot if you were the one getting that poem or have that song written to you. What'd you think of this one?
I love the raw emotion in his voice.
Yeah, it's very stripped back, a lot like Someone You Love. Piano, vocal, and just a little bit of backing vocals on this one. And obviously the story of it is fantastic. Next up is Don't Get Me Wrong. And Lewis said it's about a couple who it really isn't working between them, but they're both scared to be alone. I think this happens a lot in life. One of them wakes up one day and basically goes, man, what are we doing? There's got to be more than this. Even in the lyrics, aren't you tired of being second best or getting second best? So it has a different feel to this one.
Yeah, I actually got a real Michael Bublé, Harry Connick Jr., Norah Jones sort of feel to it.
Yeah, definitely is different than any of the previous 7 songs that we've looked at on this album. For me, Don't Go After Me, it's in that middle tier, middle of the road.
That would probably be the middle tier for me as well.
Middle tier is still awfully good on this one.
Yeah. Next up we have Hollywood, and this was a more upbeat song. The tempo was significantly different on this than it was on the previous one. So we started and ended the album with more up-tempo songs, and this one in the middle kind of went along with that. But this guy goes off to Hollywood, and he's kind of missing the girl that he left, and he wants to kind of pick up where they left off.
Yeah, some of the lyrics, I wish I'd have stayed, because love can find a way to make your feet run heavy, make your heart unsteady, then it breaks, so I'm praying that you're feeling the same. Excellent lyrics. The lyrics on all of these songs are really outstanding.
One of the big differences in this was the guitar instead of the piano.
Yes. Well, next up is Lost on You. And Lewis said this song is basically about 2 people in a relationship. They're really trying to make it work. He said, I don't believe every breakup's got to be some dramatic thing. They're trying to make it work, and they just drift apart. So therefore, they have to break up.
Yeah, and on this one, I felt like his voice was the main instrument. Of course, there was a piano in there, like on most of his songs, but his voice was so powerful. And I just felt like that was the instrumentation on here.
I agree with you. And so far of the vocal and piano songs, this one was my least favorite. I still like it, but it was my least favorite of those.
Next up is Fade. This one happens to be one of my favorites. It was also one of Lewis's favorites.
Yeah, he said it was actually his favorite on the whole album. This song is about, Lewis said, when you fall for someone. He said, I don't think anybody ever plans on falling for someone. So you fall for them, and it's that great moment that you realize that, hey, I might be in love or on my way to being in love, but you also already get the idea of, oh, it's going to suck if I ever lose this person. Their bad traits and all. So I thought that was an interesting perspective and a really truthful perspective, right? Sometimes we go, oh no, our minds go to what's the worst case scenario.
Yeah, and he just doesn't want to forget her or the emotions that she brought out in him. Doesn't want her to fade away in his mind.
So next up is Headspace, and on the regular album, if you don't have the expanded version, this is the last song. He has a really cool thing lyrically in here where it says, if you got time enough for me, sing me a song and send me to sleep. Slip into my headspace while I dream, spin me a yarn, wrap it up around me. He changes that lyric in the final chorus to tell her that they love him too. So all he knows is to be untrue. That's what he wants her to do. The yarn he wants her to spin is, hey, look, I love you too, but actually I guess she doesn't.
Yeah, and this is actually the oldest song on the album. He wrote this when he was 17. And I feel like you could really tell a difference in the feel of this song versus all of the other songs on the album. And it was very, very slow.
Yeah, and he said it wasn't even supposed to be on the album, but he's always kept it in his live set because it has a special place in his heart. So now we're up to the 3 songs that are on the extended version, which when you first wanted to do this album, you said, let's do the extended version. And I said, no way, man. At this channel, we do the proper album and nothing else.
I fought for it and essentially got my way.
It's not the fighting. It's this next song that got it on here.
It is worth it. It's one of the best songs on this album.
And it's currently #1 in the UK as we film this. Before You Go, what is this about?
He had actually talked to his mom about when he was about 6 years old, his aunt committed suicide. And so he was talking to his mom about her feelings during that time. And she was explaining how she didn't know, was there something she missed that fell through the cracks?
And she was still feeling that way 15 years later. You still have those thoughts. And I guess,
like, what could have I said? What could have I done to change the outcome?
And I think so many people, I'm sure, luckily I've never lost anyone close to me to suicide, but I would guess that is something that many fight with forever. You know, what could I have done? And so it makes, once you understand that's what this song's about, it makes it 100 times more powerful.
Very powerful.
Some of the fantastic lyrics on here. So before you go, was there something I could have said to make your heart beat better? If only I'd known you had a storm to weather. So before you go, was there something I could have said to make it all stop hurting? Kills me how your mind can make you feel so worthless. So before you go. And then in verse 2 he says, was never the right time. Whenever you called, went little by little by little until there was nothing at all. For every moment I start to replay, but all I can think about is seeing that look on your face. And you go back and think, wow, I didn't take that phone call and I didn't take that phone call. And this person's slowly deteriorating.
The guilt that's underlying.
And you didn't see it, but once it's over with, you look back and go,
what all did I miss?
I can kind of start to see little by little, and I just, you know, we get busy in our lives, Gina. That's the thing. We get busy and we don't have time for the people that we care about sometimes. And it's not anything personal against them, but man, you see a song like this and watch the video. The video is incredibly powerful. It really makes you reflective, like, whose calls or whose texts have I dodged lately, and what storm are they weathering that I have no idea about, and it's just getting worse and worse, and they're really just reaching out for a lifeline. Wow, that's a heavy turn to take on this reaction, but it is a tremendous track.
One of the best. Next up, we have Leaving My Love Behind. And this one, it was just a desperation on she's leaving him and just watching her go.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't have anything else to add to it. I thought it was fine. We're going to finish this out with Let It Roll. It's basically about he's letting this girl know he still wants her, even though she has a heart of stone. And Gina, I dated a few girls way back in the day that had a heart of stone, and it is not a fun place to be. This song is definitely different musically.
It was more upbeat. So we had the upbeat with Grace,
that's what you mentioned,
the middle with Hollywood, and then we end up with this song to round out the entire album.
Now we're going to go to our favorite tracks. Now, Gina, before we even get into this, you can't say all of them, so you got to pick.
I know. I do. I picked like 6.
You picked 6? I think I picked 5. So what do you have?
Well, I have Hold Me While You Wait, Someone You Loved, Maybe, Fade, Before You Go, and Hollywood.
Okay, so you have all of mine, so that's pretty much
what were yours?
Mine were Grace, Hollywood, Before You Go, Someone You Loved, and Maybe. So now we're to the point where we give our overall score. So I'll go first because I have a feeling you're going to give this a very high score, and I think it deserves a very high score. I grade a lot of music. So for me, this is an 8.5. Now, let me put a caveat there to say this. The reason why it's not higher, although that's an incredibly high score, is because the only downside to this album one could find is what you mentioned in that point. The songs are all very similar. Now, this was never meant to be a 15-song. You know, some of these are off an EP that Lewis put out, and they just kind of put them all together. So that's not a slight on him or whoever put this out. For me personally, it's like a 9.5. But grading it, you know, with an objective outlook on it, like I try to do on this channel, I'm going to give it an 8.5. It's absolutely outstanding. What about you?
I'm going with a 9.5. I really liked, and I guess what it boils down to is, were there any real throwaways? And I don't feel like there were.
There was no
and so I feel like I like every single track. There were a couple that were a little lower.
Sure, but it's 15 songs again, so, you know.
So a 9.5, I feel very strongly about that.
That is tremendous. And we'll send out a kudos to our daughter, Mackenzie, because if she would have never told us to do a song reaction to Someone You Love, we're a couple of old folks. We would have never heard of Lewis Capaldi.
I'd never heard of him at all. And now he's like my favorite. I'm just listening to him on repeat on Spotify. So
on that,
Scotland, good job.
If you have any suggestions that are similar to Lewis, leave them in the comments below. Please give us a big thumbs up. It really helps us get into the vaunted YouTube algorithm. We will be back soon with some other reactions. And until next time, we will see you.